Close your eyes for a second and picture this. Somewhere out there, your friends are laughing without you. Stories are being told you'll never hear, and opportunities are slipping past while your phone buzzes with reminders you can't ignore. That tight pull in your chest, that's FOMO, fear of missing out. It's not just a quirk of modern life. It's an ancient survival instinct hijacked by every notification, every glowing red dot. And it's why, even when you swear tonight you'll sleep early, you're still scrolling, right now. Before we settle in, I'd love for you to take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy spending these quiet moments with me. And there's also something new, the hype button. A single press helps push these sleepy ideas further into the algorithm, carrying them toward other curious minds who might need them tonight. I'm really curious where you're watching from. Write me in the comments what city you're in and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying there, and your mind begins to wander through the strange pathways of this feeling. Mainstream psychology says FOMO is simply social comparison at work. You see other people's curated lives and assume yours is lacking. But here's a quirky twist. Anthropologists argue FOMO is an evolutionary leftover. Back in the tribe days, missing out wasn't missing out on brunch. It was missing out on the hunt, or the fire, or the group decision that determined whether you'd survive the winter. No wonder your body reacts like missing a party is life or death. It once kind of was. You feel the pull. The pulse quickens. That's dopamine sparking as your brain imagines a reward, something you might be excluded from. It's the same chemical surge that gamblers get when they hear the slot machine spin. But unlike the gambler's reels, your slot machine is endless. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Each swipe a promise that the next post will be the jackpot. And if not this one, maybe the next, or the next after that, until your thumb aches and your eyes blur with light. Scientists still argue whether FOMO is fundamentally harmful or, paradoxically, motivating. Some say it drives you to connect, to join in, to participate. Others warn it deepens anxiety and hollows out satisfaction. Picture this. You're at a concert you dreamed about for months, but you're peeking at your phone to see if friends are at a better one. You're living your dream and still feeling behind. That's the twisted trick FOMO plays. You're always half present, half elsewhere, never fully at peace with the moment you beg the universe to give you. Now imagine the fringe side. Some digital philosophers muse that FOMO is less about fear and more about identity fragmentation. They whisper that in the digital age, you're no longer one self, but 1,000 mirrored fragments across platforms. Each version is constantly comparing itself to others, all tugging at you. That's not just missing out, it's multiplying out. Jokes aside, if you've ever felt like you need a vacation from your own Instagram feed, you're not imagining things. Your own reflection has become a crowded room. Still, there's humor in it. Like the time you stay home curled in your blanket, phone glowing in your hand, envying people out in the cold, the rain soaking their hair, the overpriced drinks draining their wallets. You didn't miss out on joy. You dodged soggy jeans and awkward small talk. Yet your brain, that stubborn relic, whispers, they're living better. Your brain is basically a mischievous roommate who never learned how to mind its own business, forever barging in to comment on things it wasn't invited to. Here's the soft irony. You can't ever fully escape FOMO, because even even opting out becomes its own flavor of it. You avoid social media. Then you worry you're missing news, jokes, little cultural sparks that everyone else is in on. You join in. You worry you should have been elsewhere. It's the human condition, with push notifications. A maze without exits. A carnival mirror that keeps showing you what might have been. And so you lay here tonight, a little sleepy, a little wired, riding this ancient instinct in modern clothes. You don't need to fight it right now. Just watch it like clouds passing, curious and harmless. Tomorrow, it will come back. Another tug, another whisper. But for now, your eyelids grow heavy, and you remember, you're not missing anything here. You're exactly where you should be, resting. And maybe that's the rarest win against FOMO, realizing that sometimes stillness is the prize. The misattribution of arousal. How emotions can be misinterpreted. Your heart is racing. Your palms are sweaty. And suddenly you're convinced you're in love. But here's the kicker. You are just on a shaky suspension bridge, or sipping one too many espressos. This is the misattribution of arousal. Your body fires up for one reason, and your mind scrambles to label it as something entirely different. Mainstream psychology explains it cleanly. Arousal is a generic state of heightened physiological activation. Your body pumps adrenaline, whether it's danger, exercise, or romance. But the brain, ever the unreliable narrator, often mislabels the source. That's why someone can think they've fallen for their date, when in reality it's just the thrill of climbing 3 flights of stairs before meeting them. Here's the fringe twist. In one famous study, men approached by a woman on a high bridge were far more likely to call her afterward than those approached on stable ground. Their trembling legs whispered love, not gravity. You've probably done this in miniature, feeling butterflies when it's really just hunger or caffeine jitters. Your stomach growls, your mind panics, and suddenly you're convinced you're having an existential crisis when really, you just skipped lunch. Scientists still argue whether misattribution is more about faulty wiring or about the flexibility of emotions. Is your brain just bad at bookkeeping, slapping random labels on bodily states? Or does this mix-up reveal the fluid, overlapping nature of feelings themselves? That fear and excitement are just 2 costumes worn by the same actor. Consider this. The same adrenaline surge fuels both terror and thrill. A roller coaster and a horror movie hijack the same circuitry. The only difference is the story you tell yourself. That's why people jump out of planes for fun, while others won't even look over a balcony. You can be drenched in sweat, heart hammering, pupils wide, and depending on context, call it a panic attack, a rush, or falling headfirst into love. And here's a fun aside. You may have laughed at rom-coms where characters confuse danger with love, but your brain isn't much better. It's basically that friend who can't tell the difference between spicy food and actual flames. Are we dying or in love? It asks. Same thing, right? What's hilarious is how persuasive it can be. You believe the story your nervous system feeds you because it feels so visceral, so real, like truth boiling in your veins. The quirky detail. Your pupils dilate when you're aroused, frightened, or simply in dim light. And studies show people rate others as more attractive when their pupils are dilated. So your biology is running a secret side game of attraction without your consent. You might think you like someone because of their charm, but really, it's just good lighting. And it doesn't stop there. Your flushed cheeks, shaky voice, or quickened breath. can all be mistaken for signs of desire, when they're really just echoes of stress or caffeine. Your body is a stagehand mixing signals behind the curtain, while your mind insists the drama unfolding is perfectly scripted. Extend this out, and the implications get strange. If so much of what we label as love, or fear, or joy can be scrambled by context, how much of your emotional life is really about reality, and how much is just an elaborate misreading of your own chemistry? Imagine entire relationships sparked not by compatibility, but by the echo of an adrenaline rush. The scary movie that convinced you someone was your soulmate. The near miss in traffic that glued you emotionally to the stranger in the passenger seat. Maybe some of our deepest bonds begin with nothing more than a misinterpreted pulse. And still, as you drift tonight, there's a strange comfort here. Even if your body tricks you, even if your mind mislabels sensations, it means you're a creature of improvisation. You build stories around pulses, shivers, and sweaty palms, stitching meaning into the raw fabric of biology. It's messy, but it's deeply human. Every misattribution is also a kind of creative act. Your nervous system painting feelings onto blank canvases of arousal. The details may be wrong, but the story is yours. And maybe that's the hidden beauty, that even in error your brain is trying to make sense, to weave coherence, to turn raw energy into something that feels like love, awe, or destiny. So the next time your heart pounds, pause. Ask, is this love, fear, hunger, or too much coffee? Chances are, it's a little of everything. And maybe that overlap is exactly what makes life so electric. An endless dance between the body's sparks and the mind's stories, never quite certain which is leading, but always moving together. Loss aversion. Why losing feels worse than winning feels good. Think about this. You find a $20 bill on the sidewalk, and you feel a spark of delight. But later, you misplace that same bill, and suddenly, the sting lingers far longer than the joy ever did. That's loss aversion in action. Your brain is wired to feel the pain of losing at roughly twice the intensity of the pleasure of gaining. Mainstream behavioral economics calls this one of the cornerstones of decision-making. People will go to wild lengths not to lose what they already have. Casinos know it, marketers know it, even video games know it. Why do you cling to a streak in a silly app? Because losing it hurts more than starting fresh ever excites you. Entire industries thrive on this quirk. Subscription services remind you what you'll lose if you cancel. Gyms boast about not giving up your progress, and apps flood you with notifications so you won't feel like you're falling behind. The hook isn't gain, it's fear of loss. Here's the quirky edge. Researchers once gave people mugs in a lab experiment. Nothing special, just a plain mug. Half the participants were told to keep it, and later they were asked how much they'd sell it for. The rest, mugless, were asked how much they'd pay to buy one. Sellers demanded nearly twice as much as buyers were willing to pay, even though it was the same mug. Possession turns a trinket into a treasure, and losing it feels like a personal wound. The moment something sits in your hand, your brain upgrades it into part of your mental self. A mug, a pen, even a chair you always sit in. Take it away, and the discomfort is disproportionate. Scientists still argue whether this bias is evolutionary armor or cultural conditioning. Is the brain simply overprotective? Because, in ancient times, losing food or shelter meant real survival risks? Or is it more about the way society trains us to clutch our possessions like lifeboats? The debate continues, but the effect is everywhere. in sports, in relationships, in money. Traders in financial markets panic at downturns and cling to failing stocks rather than admit defeat. Athletes talk more about games they blew than games they won. Even kids on the playground remember the toy that was taken more vividly than the toy they were given. Think of your last breakup. Maybe you lost a relationship you didn't even enjoy all that much. Still, the loss itself carried weight. The emptiness seemed bigger than the joy you ever squeezed out of the good days. Loss doesn't politely balance the scales. It throws a heavy stone on one side, leaving you tilted and off-center. And it doesn't even have to be romantic. Losing a favorite show when it gets cancelled, or a friend moving away, can feel unreasonably painful compared to the modest happiness you got from them in daily life. And here's a lighter joke. You know this if you've ever ordered food. The fries that never arrived with your meal. Unforgivable. The free breadsticks they brought by mistake. Nice, sure, but you'll still rant about those fries. Your brain is basically that picky diner who only remembers what's missing from the plate. Restaurants survive on this imbalance. An extra cookie barely registers, but one missing packet of ketchup can ignite fury. Fringe whispers suggest loss aversion might not just be about survival, but about identity. Some psychologists argue that when you lose something, even trivial, it feels like losing a piece of yourself. That empty wallet isn't just lighter. It's like a hole where your competence used to be. And if you've ever lost your phone, you know the sensation. Suddenly, you're not just missing a gadget, you're missing your memory, your map, your second brain. The panic isn't about the object, it's about the collapse of the extended self. You aren't just losing possessions, you're losing continuity. And this seeps into time too. People mourn wasted hours as if they were stolen currency. Cancelled plans, waiting in line, sitting in traffic. These trigger disproportionate frustration because they feel like losses carved out of your finite existence. Gains are quiet. Losses raw. Tonight, as you settle deeper into the sheets, notice how, even in the small details of your day, loss leaves its fingerprints. But here's the relief. Knowing this trick doesn't erase the sting, but it softens it. You can smile at the bias, remind yourself that the pain is louder than the gain, and let it pass like a stubborn echo. Because even if losing stings twice as much, rest has its own quiet victory. When you close your eyes, you're not losing. You're returning, not clinging, but letting go. And in that small surrender, the scales tip back toward balance. The flow state, the psychological sweet spot for peak performance. There's a moment when time forgets itself. You sit down to write, to paint, to play, and suddenly hours vanish like they were never there. That's the flow state, the rare sweet spot where challenge and skill meet in perfect balance, and your brain hums like a well-tuned engine. You're not forcing it, not drifting. You're simply in it, and it feels like the world shrinks down to just you and the task. Mainstream psychology, thanks to Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, try whispering that name 3 times, describes flow as optimal experience. It's not relaxation, and it's not stress. It's that razor-thin edge in between, where you're stretched but not snapped. Think of a musician lost in a solo, or a gamer so deep in a match they don't hear the doorbell. That's flow, and it feels better than any prize at the end. The joy isn't deferred, it's immediate, braided into every second of doing. A quirky tidbit. Studies show brain waves during flow resemble those of deep meditation. Yet your performance is at its sharpest. It's like your brain sneaks into a Zen dojo while juggling flaming torches. Athletes call it being in the zone. Coders call it crunch mode. Kids call it playing. And your brain calls it bliss. Even chess masters describe it as a tunnel where the world shrinks to 64 squares, while artists sometimes claim they disappeared and the canvas painted itself. Flow is a paradox. Total effort and effortless ease at once. Scientists still argue whether flow is something you can train, or if it's more like catching lightning in a bottle. Some insist you can engineer it. Set the right goals, remove distractions, tilt your difficulty just right. Others suggest it's more elusive, like a cat that only jumps in your lap when you stop calling it. The debate keeps researchers awake, while ironically, the rest of us fall into flow and forget the debate even exists. And maybe that's the clue. Flow thrives in forgetting, in not monitoring yourself so tightly. The moment you try too hard to hold it, it slips away. The fringe speculation? Some philosophers whisper that flow is the closest thing humans get to transcending the self. When you lose track of time, when the I fades into pure doing, maybe you're tasting a slice of what mystics and monks describe as enlightenment. For those hours, you stop narrating your life and simply live it. Or maybe, as neuroscientists insist, it's just your prefrontal cortex dialing down, so you stop overthinking your every move. Enlightenment or brain idling, take your pick. But either way, it feels like freedom. From the clock, from judgment, from the nagging you. And of course, jokes sneak in. Remember the last time you zoned out while scrolling TikTok for 3 hours? Sadly, that's not flow. That's doom scrolling, which feels productive until you realize your thumb has Olympic stamina while your brain is soup. Flow isn't mindless. It's mindful immersion. If your only takeaway was, I lost time, that's not flow. That's just your brain on autoplay. Flow leaves you tired but satisfied, while doom scrolling leaves you empty and sticky with regret. But here's the human wrinkle. Flow doesn't just feel good, it reshapes memory. Psychologists note that people recall flow activities with a glow that outshines even leisure. Vacations blur, but the hours you spent building something, composing something, being something, that sticks. Which is why so many people chase it, knowingly or not. We hunger for it more than rewards, more than relaxation, because in flow, we're both most alive and least self-conscious. And yet, not everyone meets flow in the same arenas. For some, it's painting landscapes. For others, repairing engines, solving equations, gardening until the sun sets. Flow doesn't discriminate between high art and humble craft. It cares only for absorption. You could reach it in the lab or the kitchen, in coding or calligraphy, in running or rock climbing. The medium is irrelevant. The state is the same. Still, there's a quiet magic in recognizing those rare moments when everything clicks. When writing feels like dictation from the universe. When the puzzle pieces fall into place faster than your hands can move. You may not command flow, but you can notice it, savor it, and maybe set the stage for its return tomorrow. It's less about chasing and more about clearing space, removing noise, sharpening challenge, and allowing the mind to slip in. And tonight, as your breathing slows and your body melts into the mattress, you may not be coding or painting, but you're still practicing the art of immersion. Immersed not in tasks, but in rest. Sleep, too, has its own flow. You surrender, drift, and slip past the edges of time. Maybe tomorrow lightning will strike again. Maybe not. But for now, you're already in the gentlest kind of zone, the one where effort dissolves and being itself is enough. The mere exposure effect. Why familiarity makes things feel better. You've heard a song on the radio that annoyed you the first time, right? But after the 10th spin, it's suddenly catchy, almost comforting. That's the mere exposure effect. Your brain warming up to something just because it's been around long enough. The unfamiliar is suspicious. The repeated becomes a friend, even if it's objectively mediocre. Mainstream psychology points out that humans evolved to trust familiarity. If a food didn't kill you the first few times, it was probably safe to eat again. If a face kept showing up in your camp, it was probably an ally, not a threat. That primitive math still lives in your Spotify playlist. You might groan at hearing a cheesy pop chorus again, but secretly, it's getting under your skin, settling in like wallpaper. The background becomes the baseline, and what once felt like noise slowly shifts into the comfort of pattern. A quirky tidbit. Advertisers bank on this effect. That's why you see the same jingle 5 times in one show. You don't have to like it right away, you just have to see it enough. The brain mistakes repetition for safety, and safety for affection. Suddenly, you're humming a toothpaste commercial, like it's your personal anthem. Movie studios do the same with trailers, showing you the same 30 seconds until the release feels inevitable. Politicians even use it. Repeat a slogan enough, and it burrows into memory, half believed simply because it's familiar. Scientists still argue whether mere exposure tops out, or if there's a breaking point. Does too much repetition eventually breed contempt, like that coworker who laughs at the same joke every meeting? Or does familiarity just keep padding the comfort until it feels inevitable? The debate spins on, but no one denies the gravitational pull of seen it before. Some researchers suggest the curve is U-shaped. At first, repetition breeds warmth, but eventually it flattens into boredom or even irritation. Think of that one holiday song you loved until the shopping mall played it 400 times in December. Your brain can only cradle so much before it cries for novelty. Here's the fringe corner. Some researchers whisper that mere exposure links to imprinting. Like how baby ducks follow the first moving thing they see, you attach comfort to whatever shows up early and often. Maybe that's why the first sitcom you binged as a teenager still feels like home. It isn't better, it's just yours. That laugh track doesn't sparkle with genius writing. It sparkles with the glow of being there when you needed it. Your favorite childhood snacks, old video games, even the smell of your grandparents' house. They all ride on this effect. They became part of you through repetition, not merit. Culture itself thrives on this. Rituals, holidays, and traditions are repeated until they feel sacred. The birthday candles, the anthem before a game, the same old jokes your uncle tells every year at dinner. All of it gains gravity through exposure. Imagine if each ritual was brand new every time. You'd feel unsettled, not grounded. Repetition builds belonging. And of course, here's a little humor. You ever buy a snack just because you saw it on the end cap 15 times? Your brain basically said, "Oh look, it survived the supermarket gauntlet. Must be delicious." Then you get home, taste it, and think, "This is cardboard." But too late. Mere exposure already put its sticky little stamp of approval on it. The same thing happens with streaming shows. You scroll past the thumbnail so many times that one day you press play, convinced it must be good. It's not magic. It's just marketing piggybacking on your brain's lazy shortcut. But this isn't all manipulation. Sometimes mere exposure is kindness. Think of the new co-worker who at first seemed distant, even odd. Over weeks, their quirks soften into familiarity, or the book you struggled through at first, only to find its language easier on the second or third reading. Comfort comes not from perfection, but from repetition. The one strange becomes the almost beloved, simply because it's been around long enough to earn a space in your inner circle. Tonight, as you lie there, you're bathing in familiar sounds. Your own breathing, the hum of the fan, maybe distant traffic. Each repetition softens the edge of awareness until comfort settles in. That's mere exposure at work too. Even the silence becomes friendlier as you grow accustomed to it. Tomorrow, new things will jostle for attention. Your brain will test them, prod them, hold them at a wary distance. But if they keep showing up, they may one day feel like home too. For now, you're surrounded by the cozy embrace of the known, rhythms, noises, and patterns your body trusts. And in that embrace, you can finally let go, because familiarity, for all its quirks, is a lullaby in disguise. The halo effect. How first impressions shape everything you see. You meet someone with a dazzling smile, and instantly, before they've said a single clever thing, you assume they're smart, kind, probably even good at cooking. That's the halo effect in action. One shining trait spills over, painting the whole person in borrowed light. Your brain is basically holding a paintbrush dipped in bias, coloring the rest of the picture with one bright stroke, even filling in details that were never really there. Mainstream psychology shows this is everywhere. Teachers give higher grades to students they find more attractive. Jurors lean softer toward defendants who look trustworthy. And job applicants with polished charm often skate past rough edges. Your brain doesn't weigh traits one by one. It throws them in a blender and hits smoothie. First impressions act like glue, sticking everything else together in ways that feel logical, but are really leaps of assumption. Quirky tidbit. This isn't limited to people. Products bask in the halo effect too. If a brand nails sleek packaging, you'll swear the chips inside taste better. Same coffee, different cup, and suddenly it's a premium experience. Even fonts trick us. One study found medical advice written in a clean, professional font was rated as more accurate than the same advice in Comic Sans. Sorry, Comic Sans lovers, but your doctor's note is not the place for whimsy. Marketing teams know this by heart. Shine up one detail, and the whole product glows. Think of smartphones. Half the magic is sleek glass and smooth edges, convincing you the inner circuitry must be equally refined. Scientists still argue whether the halo effect is purely a cognitive shortcut, or if it's also socially adaptive. Does it simply save brain energy, like fast-forwarding through a movie? Or did it evolve because seeing one strong trait often did predict survival, like recognizing someone strong enough to defend the group might also be a decent ally? The jury is still split, ironically, probably influenced by some jurors' first impression of the researchers. Some argue it's a relic of times when quick judgments meant survival. Others argue it's a flaw, leaving us vulnerable to charmers, con artists, and shiny but empty promises. The fringe speculation drifts into self-image. Some psychologists whisper that we carry our own halos. You think one compliment defines you. You're creative. You're funny. And suddenly every moment bends to match it. You live in the glow of a single trait, for better or worse, editing out the rest. that one encouraging teacher, that one performance review, that one childhood nickname. They all carve grooves in the mind that shape the whole story of who you are. And if a halo can be cast, so can a shadow. One criticism can stain every memory, just as one glow can gild it. Culture feeds this too. Celebrities ride their halos. An actor admired for one powerful role suddenly feels wise on politics, medicine, or lifestyle. Athletes are turned into heroes, then spokespeople, as if talent on a field translates into moral insight. Even nations and movements lean on halo effects. A single shining achievement is leveraged to color everything else, from branding to diplomacy. Our world is a gallery of halos, bright or dim, distorting the portraits we think we see clearly. And sometimes entire histories are remembered through a single golden trait. And of course, the joke writes itself. The same halo effect that makes you think your crush is perfect also makes you ignore that they chew like a cement mixer or never replace the toilet paper roll. Your brain is basically photoshopping reality, adding filters where none belong. Think of every awkward wedding toast where someone insists the couple is flawless angels, while half the room knows they once argued for 20 minutes about Tupperware lids. The halo edits out the grit. But here's the sleepy comfort. The halo effect means the first light you shine on someone, or something, has the power to soften everything around it. Tonight, as you drift, remember that even small glimmers can cast long shadows. A smile, a kind word, a gentle sound. They stretch, they color, they halo your night with calm. And just as you misjudge people brighter than they are, you might be misjudging yourself darker than you are. Let the glow of one kindness, one quiet win, tint the rest. Because halos, though deceptive, can also be gentle lies we need. The ones that let us believe, for a moment, that the world is softer, warmer, and more forgiving than it really is. The Zeigarnik effect. How unfinished tasks stay in your mind. You close your laptop, but the to-do list doesn't close with it. Those half-finished emails, that laundry waiting in the basket, the conversation you meant to reply to. They buzz in the background of your thoughts like a neon sign you can't switch off. That's the Zeigarnik effect, named after psychologist Bloomer Zeigarnik, who noticed that waiters remembered unpaid orders far better than completed ones. Once the bill was settled, the memory dissolved. But unfinished business? That stuck like gum on a shoe. Mainstream psychology explains this as a tension in your cognitive system. Your brain treats open loops like cliffhangers, nagging you to tie them up. You felt it when you can't stop thinking about the task you almost completed. It's not the finished chores that haunt you, it's the dangling ones, glowing like little alarm lights. That's why a single unchecked box on your list seems louder than the 10 things you actually finished. Completion is quiet. Incompletion shouts. Quirky tidbit. TV writers use the Zeigarnik effect against you every time they end an episode with "to be continued." Your mind resists letting go of unfinished arcs, so you press next episode until suddenly the sun is rising and you're 10 episodes deep. The cliffhanger isn't an accident. It's psychology weaponized for your streaming queue. News headlines do the same. Scientists discover shocking link. And then you click, desperate to close the loop. Even riddles and puzzles thrive on it. Your brain gnaws on the problem long after you've walked away, tugging at loose threads like a cat with yarn. Scientists still argue whether the Zeigarnik effect actually boosts memory, or if it simply keeps attention hostage. Is it your brain sharpening recall to protect survival, like remembering you didn't finish gathering food or securing shelter? Or is it just anxious static, a maladaptive side effect of modern overload? The debate plays on, but your late-night tossing proves the effect is real enough. One camp sees it as a gift of persistence. Another sees it as the root of modern restlessness, making sleep feel like a negotiation with your own unfinished thoughts. On the fringe, some researchers whisper that leaving tasks unfinished might actually fuel creativity. That itch to complete things nudges your subconscious to keep working, even in the background. Ever notice how solutions arrive in the shower, or just as you're drifting off? That might be the Zeigarnik effect feeding your dreams with half-baked puzzles. Writers sometimes swear by stopping mid-sentence, so when they return, the momentum is waiting. It's like planting an unfinished melody in your head, so your mind can't resist humming the next note. And here's a playful jab. Your brain doesn't care whether the task is vital or silly. It nags you equally about world peace and about whether you left a spoon in the sink. Forget to send taxes. Big stress. Forget to finish that jigsaw puzzle. Weirdly, still stress. You leave one text unanswered and suddenly it's haunting you like a ghost of digital etiquette. Your brain is basically a clingy friend who won't leave until you tie up every loose end. Hey, you forgot this, it whispers, no matter how trivial. Culture capitalizes on this too. Games keep you hooked with incomplete quests, dangling icons on your screen until you feel compelled to finish. Apps ping you with streaks and half-complete achievements. Even social media runs on the same principle. You keep scrolling because the feed never ends. Always one more unfinished thread to chase. The internet is a giant Zeigarnik machine, engineered to leave you perpetually mid-cliffhanger, dangling in suspense with no credits rolling. But tonight, as you lie here, notice the uncompleted loops floating in your mind. They don't have to close right now. You can let them soften, blur, fade like unfinished doodles in a notebook. Tomorrow, some of them will still tug, but in this moment, they can rest with you, unresolved but harmless, like stories paused mid-chapter. Because sometimes, the kindest trick is reminding yourself that an open loop can wait. You don't have to be the waiter carrying every unpaid bill forever. For now, let the table clear itself. Let the lights dim. Even unfinished, you're allowed to rest. And maybe, in the morning, the answers will already be waiting, tied up neatly by the quiet work your dreaming mind has done. And if not, that's fine too. Because life itself is a series of open loops, and peace comes not from closing them all, but from learning to rest while some remain undone. The vividness effect. Why we remember strange, colorful, or dramatic details. You probably can't recall what you ate for lunch 3 weeks ago, but you can instantly remember the bright red shoes your teacher wore on the day you spilled juice in class 10 years back. That's the vividness effect. Your brain latches onto odd, colorful, or dramatic details and replays them like they're highlights in a personal documentary. The everyday dissolves like mist, while a single bright spark stays etched as if carved into stone. Mainstream psychology explains that vivid events are easier to encode and retrieve. Our ancestors needed this, remembering the bright berries that made you sick, or the dramatic lightning strike near the campfire could mean survival. So your brain prioritizes anything unusual, strange, or emotional over the dull backdrop of everyday life. It's the difference between grey static and a flashing neon sign. Your mind stores the neon first. That's why birthdays blur. But the one where the cake fell on the floor is crystal clear. A quirky tidbit. In courtrooms, juries are more swayed by vivid testimony than by dry statistics. Tell them 5 out of 100 patients suffer side effects, and they shrug. Tell them one story about Sarah, a young mother bedridden after a reaction, and suddenly the room shifts. The single vivid tale outshines a mountain of data because your brain is wired for drama, not spreadsheets. Advertisers know this too. Show one glowing face using a product, and it beats any technical breakdown of percentages. The mind craves color, not charts. Scientists still argue whether this bias helps or hurts us in the modern world. Is it a valuable shortcut, highlighting what truly matters? Or is it a distortion, tricking us into overvaluing rare, flashy events? After all, plane crashes dominate the news. But statistically, you're far safer in the air than on your daily drive. Yet what do you picture when you buckle a seatbelt on a flight? Not the math, just the fiery scenes you've seen once. News cycles know this. Tragedy burns itself into memory, while quiet, everyday safety never trends. The fringe corner stretches further. Some researchers muse that vividness might explain folklore and myths. Strange colors in the sky, odd animal behaviors, dramatic weather, all encoded as unforgettable, retold as supernatural tales. Maybe the vividness effect is the glue between memory and myth, exaggerating the extraordinary until it becomes legend. Ancient storytellers weren't lying. They were simply remembering the brightest sparks and polishing them in retelling. Over centuries, a strange storm becomes the wrath of gods. A shooting star becomes an omen. A flood becomes the birth of a myth. And here's a lighter note. Your brain will forget the name of someone you met 2 hours ago, but it will forever hold onto the sight of that pigeon you once saw strutting into a coffee shop like it owned the place. That's the vividness effect flexing its bizarre priorities. Important business meeting? Nah. Funny bird in Starbucks? Immortal. The same thing happens with travel. Entire days blur together, but you'll never forget the time your umbrella flipped inside out in the middle of Paris traffic. Vividness curates your life like a mischievous editor, picking the strangest stills for the highlight reel. And sometimes those details carry emotions long after. The smell of sunscreen can pull you back to one childhood summer, the squeak of shoes on a gym floor to high school games. Culture leans into this too. Movies stick not because of every scene, but because of a few unforgettable shots. A shark's fin cutting the water, a hand reaching through fogged glass, a single line of dialogue that won't leave your head. Even songs work this way. One chorus, one lyric hooks you forever, while the rest of the track fades. Vividness stitches identity. The images, sounds, and words that stay become the shorthand for who we think we are. As you settle into bed tonight, notice how your mind drifts not toward the plain hours of your day, but to the brighter sparks. The joke that made you snort, the splash of sunset orange you caught through a window, the embarrassing moment you'll laugh about tomorrow. The vividness effect colors your memory like neon graffiti on the walls of your ordinary hours. And for now, you can let those glowing fragments blur into dreams. Tomorrow will add new details, some faded, some shining. But tonight, you rest surrounded by the strange, colorful highlights your mind decided were worth keeping, like lanterns flickering against the dark. gentle proof that even small sparks can light up the map of memory. The social proof effect. How others' actions influence our choices. You walk past two restaurants, one empty, one buzzing with people. Without thinking, you feel drawn to the crowded one, as if strangers you'll never meet know something you don't. That's the social proof effect. Your brain outsourcing judgment to the group, assuming the majority must have cracked the code. Even if the crowded place smells worse, even if the quiet place has better food, the pull of the herd feels safer than the leap of independence. Mainstream psychology shows this instinct runs deep. In ambiguous situations, people look to others for cues on how to behave. If everyone in the theater laughs, you laugh louder. If everyone stares at the sky, you crane your neck too, half expecting UFOs. It's survival logic. If the group moved toward the waterhole, it was safer than going solo. Early humans who ignored the crowd risked missing food, missing fire, or missing the stampede that was about to trample them. Conformity wasn't weakness, it was insurance. A quirky tidbit. Even laugh tracks in sitcoms are engineered social proof. You know they're fake, you know it's canned, and yet studies show you laugh more and rate jokes as funnier when that background cackle plays. It's like your brain doesn't trust its own taste in comedy without backup from invisible strangers. Advertisers know this too. That's why they splash best-selling or most popular across packaging. You don't need to test the product. Your brain relaxes into the crowd's decision. If so many people bought it, it must be good. Scientists still argue whether social proof is primarily adaptive, helping us bond and coordinate, or manipulative, making us too easy to steer. Is it the glue of social life, or the lever marketers pull to sell you overpriced sneakers because everyone's wearing them? The line is thin and often blurred. Economists see it as efficient. Why reinvent the wheel when you can copy what works? But ethicists see it as a weakness that makes us vulnerable to mass hysteria, cults, and consumer traps. On the fringe, some researchers whisper that social proof might be a key reason for viral culture itself. Memes, trends, dances, they don't spread because they're objectively brilliant, but because each share is a tiny vote. The more you see it, the more you assume it must matter, until suddenly the whole world is pointing at a dress arguing about whether it's blue or gold. It's not about brilliance, it's about momentum. The snowball doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to roll. And the joke here is obvious. How many times have you read online reviews and thought, wow, 500 strangers loved this toaster, so it must be the best toaster of all time. 3 days later, it burns your bread, and you wonder if you were hypnotized by 5-star emojis. Your brain basically said, if everyone else jumped off a bridge, you should too, preferably into the shopping cart. And yet, the next time you shop, you'll check the stars again, trusting the wisdom of the crowd over your own scorched breakfast. Culture thrives on this. Fashion cycles, best-selling books, blockbuster movies. They're all buoyed not just by quality, but by visibility. People line up for sneakers they'll never wear, or crowd into museums for an exhibit they don't understand, because being there signals they're part of the larger wave. We often don't choose what's best, we choose what's chosen, and strangely, that very act makes it feel worthwhile. Social proof is the invisible applause track to human life, nudging you to join in, clap when others clap, nod when others nod. Sometimes that's dangerous. Sometimes it's just how we build belonging. But tonight, social proof softens into something gentler. Even lying here, hearing these words, you're part of a quiet crowd. thousands of other restless listeners drift off to the same cadence, the same rhythm, each following the subtle signal that it's okay to close your eyes. The group leads the way, and you follow into sleep, safe in the invisible company of others. It's the rare moment where conformity isn't a trap but a comfort. Proof that you're not alone in seeking rest. Proof that even in solitude, you're part of a collective hush. And maybe that's the sweetest version of social proof, when the presence of others helps you finally let go. Because sometimes all you need to relax is the sense that others are relaxing too. Like a camp settling by the fire or a neighborhood growing quiet after dusk. Tonight, you join that rhythm and drift with them into sleep. The decoy effect. How your choices can be subtly manipulated. You're picking between two popcorn sizes at the theater. Small for $4 or large for $7. Then, bam, the menu adds a medium for $6.50. Suddenly, the large looks like a steal. That's the decoy effect, where an intentionally lopsided third option makes one of the others irresistibly attractive. You didn't want the large, but now you can't resist the better deal. Mainstream behavioral economics explains it this way. Humans don't judge value in absolute terms. We compare. A decoy anchors your brain, tilting the scales. The medium isn't meant to sell. It's bait. Your brain doesn't notice the trap. It just pats itself on the back for being smart. We think we're rational shoppers weighing options, but really, we're dancers pulled by invisible strings, swaying toward the choice that the designer wanted all along. Quirky tidbit. This works far beyond popcorn. Magazines famously offer print for $20, online for $20, or print and online for $25. Almost nobody picks the second option, but its presence pushes nearly everyone to pick the $25 bargain. Without the decoy, people might settle for cheaper. With it, they shell out more, grinning all the while. Travel websites do the same. 3 hotel rooms side by side, and one is obviously the loser, making the other 2 gleam with sudden appeal. Wine list too. No sommelier needed. Just throw in a $200 bottle nobody will ever order, and suddenly the $90 one feels like restraint. Scientists still argue whether the decoy effect reveals irrationality or adaptive efficiency. Are we hopelessly manipulable, stumbling into every pricing trick? Or are these shortcuts efficient ways to make quick decisions in a world of overload? Maybe your brain is less foolish and more fast, choosing by relative weight instead of endless math. After all, you don't have the time to do equations every time you buy toothpaste or pick lunch. Decoys may trick you, but they also speed you up, and sometimes speed feels like sanity. On the fringe side, some researchers whisper that decoys don't just affect purchases, but even dating and politics. Introduce a third candidate, or suitor, who's clearly inferior to one, and suddenly the stronger one shines brighter. Like stage lighting, the decoy makes the star look flawless. People think they're choosing freely, but the menu has been rigged from the start. In relationships, this is the wingman effect. Standing next to someone less polished can inflate your perceived charm. In politics, fringe candidates often tilt perception of the main players, not by winning, but by making one contender look reasonable. Culture thrives on it too. Streaming services nudge you into premium tiers by offering oddly priced mid-plans no one is supposed to want. Restaurants design menus with anchor dishes you'll never order, just to make the real moneymakers seem like bargains. Even gyms play this game. $40 for basic access, $60 for unlimited classes, $59 for equipment only. Nobody wants the weird $59 one. It's the popcorn medium in disguise. And yet, people happily flock to the $60 tier, certain they've beaten the system. And the light-hearted bit. Remember the last time you went out for dinner and said, "I'll just grab something small." Then the menu slapped you with, "Small for $9, large for $11. You walked out stuffed with enough pasta to feed a soccer team, congratulating yourself for saving $2. That's not frugality. It's psychology giggling behind the menu. Or the movie bundle you bought because the special edition looked like such a steal compared to the overpriced collector's set you never wanted anyway. Your cabinets, your subscriptions, your streaming queues, they're all filled with choices you never meant to make, nudged into being by carefully placed decoys. But here's a softer reflection. Maybe the decoy effect isn't always sinister. Sometimes, the decoy gives you permission to pick something indulgent, something you secretly wanted but wouldn't justify without the better deal. Maybe you didn't really want the giant popcorn, but you wanted the feeling of abundance, of treating yourself, of leaning back in a theater chair with butter on your fingers. And the decoy was the excuse. Sometimes the trick isn't just manipulation, it's collaboration, helping you say yes to a desire you already had. Tonight, though, there's no decoy. There's no third option pulling your mind toward expensive choices. Just the quiet luxury of stillness, which doesn't need tricks to feel valuable. Your brain can rest without weighing popcorn or pasta, without calculating false bargains. You've already chosen the best deal, closing your eyes and letting sleep take the lead. No bait, no anchor, no invisible hand tugging you toward premium rest. Just you and the soft clarity of a decision that needs no comparison. For once, the simplest option really is the smartest one. The anchoring effect. How first impressions influence your decisions. You're haggling at a flea market, and the seller starts at $200 for a lamp you know is worth maybe $50. Yet when you counter with $80, it feels like you've made a bold move, even though you're still paying more than you wanted. That's the anchoring effect. Your brain latches onto the first number, word, or impression it sees, and everything else gets pulled toward it like a magnet. Mainstream psychology demonstrates this over and over. When asked whether Gandhi was older or younger than 140 when he died, people laugh, but their guesses afterward are still skewed higher than if the first number had been 40. The anchor plants itself, and your brain builds a whole framework around it. It's the mind's strange loyalty to the first idea tossed into the ring, no matter how absurd. Once the number drops, it doesn't just vanish, it quietly steers. Quirky tidbit. Online shopping thrives on this. Retailers slash through original prices with giant red tags, anchoring your perception. You weren't going to spend $89 on that shirt, but suddenly $39 feels like you robbed the place. The fact that the shirt was always worth about $20 is conveniently erased. Real estate agents use it too, showing you an overpriced house first so that the merely expensive one looks like a bargain. Anchoring sets the stage, and suddenly the unreasonable becomes the new normal. Scientists still argue whether anchoring is purely a cognitive bias, or if it can sometimes serve as a useful shortcut. Maybe, in a chaotic world, anchoring gives your brain a starting point, a rough compass. Or maybe it just hijacks you into paying more, tipping scales in someone else's favor. The line between shortcut and manipulation remains blurry. Some say it's efficiency, your brain grabbing the first peg to hang its coat on. Others say it's trickery, an exploit hidden in plain sight. On the fringe, some researchers whisper that anchors can even shape morality and memory. Your first impression of someone, how they look, how they speak, can anchor all future judgments, making it nearly impossible to reset your opinion. Even new evidence gets bent around the first snapshot. It's like wet cement poured into your perception, hard to chip away later. A single word in a news article can tilt how you interpret an entire story. A first teacher's remark, "You're smart," or "You're lazy," anchors how a child sees themselves for years. Anchors aren't just numbers, they're narratives. And here's the cheeky part. Anchoring explains why your friends guess the number game feels like wizardry. They ask if Mount Everest is taller or shorter than 10,000 feet. Spoiler, it's way taller. Then they ask for your actual guess, and you still undershoot, anchored by that silly number. Your brain basically says, "Thanks for the random suggestion. I'll keep that forever." Even when you know the trick, you're not immune. You're tugged anyway, like a ship chained to a buoy. Culture and commerce thrive on this. Negotiations, auctions, salary talks. Whoever names the first figure frames the entire conversation. A high anchor makes every counteroffer seem reasonable, even if it's inflated. A low anchor can undersell worth, making greatness look ordinary. The stock market swings on anchors too. A company's past high becomes a reference point, making current prices feel like steals or scams. Anchors frame not only choices, but entire stories. Everyday life is anchored too. The first bite of food shapes how you judge the whole meal. The first day in a new city colors your impression of the place for years. The first seconds of a song decide whether you'll skip or stay. And even in relationships, the first gesture, kind or careless, can define the tone, rippling forward long after the moment ends. Anchors don't just tilt, they define. And here's a lighter one. Think about menus that list a $200 lobster tower at the top. Hardly anyone orders it, but suddenly the $70 entree feels reasonable. The lobster is the Gandalf of the menu. It shows up, anchors the scale, then vanishes into legend, leaving every other dish bathed in its shadow. Or those limited edition sneakers that launch at absurd prices just to make the regular pair look like a bargain. Anchors are everywhere, hiding in plain sight, nudging you with invisible elbows. As you lie here though, notice how the first sounds of your night anchor your rest. The fan hum, the rhythm of your breath, the softness of the sheets. Those are your anchors now. They tilt the scales toward calmness, pulling every thought in their direction until even the day's loudest worries feel faint and distant. Unlike the anchors that trap you in bias, these anchors are gentle ones, tethering you to comfort. They remind you that sometimes the first impression can be soft, kind, and steady. A rhythm that draws everything else into balance. Tonight, let those anchors hold you, not in manipulation, but in peace. The illusion of control. Why we think we have more control than we do. You press the crosswalk button and feel certain the light changes faster because of you. Spoiler: in most cities, that button isn't even connected anymore. Still, your brain hands you a gold star for making it happen. That's the illusion of control. Your mind's habit of inflating its influence over randomness, like a stagehand convinced they're steering the whole play with a single rope. Mainstream psychology reveals this in the way people throw dice. Roll them gently if they want low numbers, slam them hard for high ones. It's absurd. Physics already decided the outcome the moment the dice left your hand, but it feels real, and that feeling can be strangely comforting. Slot machine players do the same, timing their pulls as if rhythm can bend probability. Our brains hate powerlessness, so they sprinkle us with pretend powers. Here's a quirky tidbit. In offices, studies found people with thermostats that weren't connected to anything still reported feeling more comfortable. Just touching the dial gave them the sense of control, even when the air conditioning ignored them. Fake levers, placebo switches, phantom buttons. Your brain loves them all. Pilots once reported a similar thing. Knobs and dials that weren't actually hooked up to controls still gave them reassurance in turbulence. The gesture mattered more than the mechanics. Scientists still argue whether the illusion of control is maladaptive delusion or a survival mechanism. Does it just make you gullible, wasting energy on rituals that change nothing? Or does the belief itself reduce stress, improving resilience even when circumstances can't be changed? Maybe control is less about facts and more about soothing perception. Believing you have a hand on the wheel can lower anxiety, steady your pulse, and let you focus enough to take real action where it counts. Illusions can have teeth, not because they're true, but because your body listens when your mind whispers, "We've got this." The fringe side stretches into superstition. Athletes wear lucky socks, gamblers kiss dice, students use special pens for exams. Logically meaningless, yet subjectively powerful. Some researchers whisper that rituals may actually boost performance, not because they alter reality, but because they calm anxiety, sharpening focus. Luck might be fake, but the effect? Very real. Cultures across the world have spun entire traditions out of this illusion. Charms against the evil eye, dances for rain, knocking on wood. They don't change the clouds, but they soothe the people looking up at them. Whole religions and social rituals sometimes hinge on this same comfort. The feeling that your small action nudges the universe toward kindness. And here's the laughable side. Think about those moments when you hammer the elevator button like you're summoning a spirit. It doesn't make it arrive faster, but your brain acts like you're the boss of vertical transportation. If elevators had feelings, they'd be sighing, "I was coming anyway, chill." Or when you click refresh on a loading screen a dozen times, convinced the page will sprint to life just because you poked it. The universe is unmoved, but your restless thumb insists otherwise. Even video games thrive on this, letting you mash buttons that don't do anything, just to keep your illusion alive. Everyday life is packed with these phantom controls. Parents pressing toys to help their children, even when the toy is self-running. Remote controls you aim harder at the TV, as if your stern glare boosts the signal. Crossing your fingers before a test, double-checking the door lock 3 times, half protection, half placebo. None of it guarantees outcomes, but all of it helps you feel prepared. And sometimes that feeling is enough to carry you through. The illusion may not change reality, but it changes your posture toward it. But tonight, the illusion of control gently flips itself. You don't need to push levers or slam dice to earn calm. The act of lying down, of deciding to listen, of choosing to breathe deeply, those are rituals too. They might not command the universe, but they persuade your body to soften. The choice to notice your breath, to sink into sheets, to let go of effort, those are your lucky socks, your invisible switches, your winning dice throws. They remind you that sometimes the ritual is the reality, and in that small, quiet sense, Control is real enough. Even if the universe ignores your buttons, your body doesn't. Tonight, you press the only switch that matters, the one that tells your mind it's safe to rest. The Paimon effect. How expectations shape our reality. You walk into a classroom where the teacher whispers, "This group is especially gifted." Without realizing it, those students begin performing better, more confident, more engaged. That's the Pygmalion effect, the phenomenon where other people's expectations sculpt your behavior until the prophecy fulfills itself, like a mirror held up that quietly teaches you how to stand taller. Mainstream psychology traces this back to a famous study. Teachers were told that certain students were poised to bloom academically. The children were randomly chosen, but months later, those same students outperformed their peers. Why? Because the teachers unconsciously gave them more attention, more patience, more belief. Expectation became reality. A teacher's raised eyebrow, extra nod, or second chance became fertilizer for growth, all without anyone noticing the soil was being enriched. A quirky detail. This doesn't just happen in schools. Managers who expect their teams to thrive often inspire exactly that. Coaches who believe in their players get fiercer games. Even in relationships, when you assume kindness, you notice it more, and your partner leans into it. It's like tossing someone an invisible script, and they start reading it without realizing. Parents see it too. Label a child helpful or clever, and watch them act the part. Label them troublemaker, and they'll live down to it. The script doesn't just float, it embeds. Scientists still argue whether the effect is strong enough to rewrite destinies, or just nudges performance at the edges. Is it a powerful lever that shapes entire futures, or a gentle breeze that only sways outcomes a little? The debate continues, but no one denies that human beings are astonishingly sensitive to belief. Even skeptics admit, expectation is a lens, and what you look for, you amplify. That amplification can mean the difference between a shy voice staying silent or daring to speak. Fringe whispers extend this idea further, into placebo territory. Some researchers muse that if belief from others can boost performance, then belief in ourselves might bend reality even more. That's where self-fulfilling prophecies come in. Tell yourself you'll fail, and you sabotage. Tell yourself you're capable, and suddenly you act like it's true. Skeptics roll their eyes, but the pattern is everywhere. From exams to job interviews, even to healing. Patients told their recovery will be strong sometimes recover faster. Confidence alone doesn't cure, but it can tilt the odds. Culture thrives on this too. Sports commentators hype a player, and suddenly fans and teammates treat them like a star, feeding momentum until performance rises to meet it. Investors hyper stock, and expectation itself inflates value. Even artists and musicians are pulled along. The first glowing review becomes a halo, reshaping how audiences hear the notes or see the strokes. Expectation is a hidden hand, curating not just outcomes but entire reputations. And of course, the joke writes itself. Expectations don't just elevate, they trip you too. Ever had someone hand you a fancy glass of wine and say, "This one's exquisite"? You swirl, sip, nod solemnly, only to find out later it was $5 at the grocery store. Your taste buds weren't fooled. Your expectations were. Or when you're told a comedian is the funniest person alive, and suddenly you're chuckling politely at jokes that barely deserve a smile. Your brain basically said, "We're drinking prestige tonight." and dressed up the experience accordingly. But the darker twin lurks too, the golem effect. When people expect little of you, that shadow shapes outcomes as surely as praise does. Students treated as slow slip behind. Workers doubted by their bosses underperform. Partners assumed to be selfish act more selfishly. The prophecy cuts both ways. Golden scripts lift, but grim ones weigh heavy. Belief can be a scaffold or a cage. Still, there's power in noticing. If expectation can tilt you without consent, maybe awareness lets you edit the script. Maybe you can toss yourself a kinder prophecy. I will manage this. I can grow here. I am enough. Even whispered, even half believed, the words plant seeds. They may not guarantee destiny, but they lean the soil toward bloom. Tonight, though, the only expectation is rest. As you listen, your body begins to follow the script. A little calmer, a little heavier, a little slower. The prophecy, in this case, is gentle. You will sleep. And in the quiet unfolding of belief, you probably will. The Pygmalion effect doesn't just belong to classrooms or boardrooms. It belongs here too, in the hush of a bedroom, where expectation writes its final line of the day. You are safe, and you are allowed to rest. Cognitive dissonance. The mental tug-of-war between beliefs and actions. You tell yourself you're health conscious, but then you eat half a pizza at midnight. Instead of admitting the contradiction, your brain scrambles to patch the gap. I deserved it. I'll work out tomorrow. It wasn't that many slices. That mental discomfort is cognitive dissonance. The brain's itchy refusal to let beliefs and actions clash without an excuse. It's like an overzealous editor, rewriting your script on the fly so the story doesn't sound ridiculous, even when it clearly is. Mainstream psychology shows this in countless ways. Smokers know cigarettes are harmful, yet rationalize with, "It relaxes me." Consumers overspend on gadgets, then argue, "I'll use it for years." The mind hates conflict, so it bends reality until things line up again, at least on paper. Dieters cheat on meal plans and insist it was a special occasion. Students procrastinate all weekend and whisper, "I work better under pressure." The dissonance doesn't vanish, it just gets muffled under excuses. A quirky tidbit. Cult researchers notice that when end-of-world predictions fail, followers often double down instead of walking away. Why? Because admitting the belief was false would create unbearable dissonance. Instead, they flip the script. Our faith prevented the disaster. Contradiction becomes justification, and the story survives. Similar patterns show up in politics, where supporters reframe broken promises as victories in disguise, twisting reality until it matches loyalty. Dissonance isn't just personal, it's collective theatre. Scientists still argue whether cognitive dissonance is a flaw or a feature. Is it a mental glitch that keeps us dishonest with ourselves? Or is it a coping tool, letting us stay functional despite our messy contradictions? If we felt the full weight of every inconsistency, maybe we'd never move at all. Imagine pausing at every misalignment. I recycle, but I fly on planes. I value honesty, but I just lied about liking that movie. The tension would paralyze us. Excuses are the grease that keeps the gears turning. The fringe speculation goes further. Some psychologists whisper that cognitive dissonance is the birthplace of personal growth. That tension between what you believe and what you do can either warp into excuses or spark real change. The discomfort is a signal, they say, not just a cover-up. It's your mind tugging at your sleeve. This doesn't fit. Fix it. Think of it as mental friction. Too much, and you burn out in denial. Just enough, and you shift direction. Many life changes, quitting smoking, leaving toxic jobs, reshaping values, begin not in clarity, but in the itch of contradiction. History is packed with examples. When slavery was challenged, societies bent into elaborate justifications until the dissonance grew unbearable and reform broke through. When health warnings about sugar spread, companies reframed sodas as energy boosters or happiness in a can. Marketing itself is often a giant dissonance machine, helping you feel okay about indulgence by painting it as virtue. You deserve this. Treat yourself. Translation: keep the contradiction, we'll dress it up for you. And here's the playful joke. Remember buying clothes online 2 sizes too small, telling yourself, I'll shrink into these by summer. That's dissonance masquerading as optimism. By August, the jeans are still tight, but your excuses have Olympic flexibility. Or when you tell yourself you'll only binge 1 episode, then greet sunrise insisting, it was basically 1 long movie. Your brain deserves a medal in mental gymnastics, twisting until reality matches the narrative. The irony is that cognitive dissonance makes us both laughable and beautifully human. It's the gap between who we say we are and what we actually do. A gap filled with excuses, yes, but also with possibility. The same mechanism that lets us justify midnight pizza can also propel us to align actions with deeper values if we listen. It's both a cover-up and a compass. As you lie here tonight, notice the small contradictions humming in your own life. Not to scold them, not to fix them now, but to see them for what they are. Tiny knots in the fabric of thought. Over time, some untangle. Others stay twisted. But in this moment, the tug of war loosens. No excuses, no scrambling. Just the simple truth that you're tired, and rest is the action that matches the belief. Let the stories wait. Let the contradictions soften. Tonight, at least, your mind and body agree. It's time to sleep. The Barnum Effect. Why you believe general statements are about you. You read a horoscope that says, you sometimes doubt yourself, but deep down you know you have untapped potential. Instantly, it feels personal, as if the stars peeked through your window just to send you a note. That's the Barnum Effect, the tendency to see vague, generic statements as laser-targeted truths, even though they could apply to nearly anyone. Mainstream psychology shows this trick works because humans crave meaning and self-recognition. Given a broad enough statement, your brain does the work of filling in details. You felt lonely applies to everyone, but the way you remember that specific Tuesday night on the couch makes it feel tailor-made. The brain doesn't just hear the words, it paints them in your colors, with your memories as the backdrop. Here's a quirky tidbit. Psychologists tested this by giving students personality descriptions supposedly based on assessments. Each student received the exact same description, loaded with broad traits like you value honesty and you sometimes worry what others think. Nearly all rated it as highly accurate. The kicker? The description came from a newspaper astrology column. It didn't matter that it was vague. It mattered that it felt like a reflection. Scientists still argue whether the Barnum effect is just gullibility or a subtle form of self-reflection. Are we duped because we're wired to believe authority? Or do we use these broad statements as mirrors, reflecting back what we already know but rarely articulate? The debate hums along like a fortune cookie conveyor belt. Is it a trick? Or is it just a poetic shortcut to self-awareness? On the fringe, some suggest the effect explains why pseudosciences, from palm reading to personality quizzes, stay so magnetic. They don't tell you anything new. They remind you of the truths you already half know, wrapped in mystique. That sense of recognition can feel more powerful than hard data. Astrology, tarot, enneagrams, BuzzFeed quizzes. They all trade in the same currency. The pleasure of nodding and saying, "Yes, that's me." History even bears this out. P.T. Barnum, the showman for whom the effect is named, once boasted, "We've got something for everybody." His circus thrived on broad spectacle, so many kinds of acts that each visitor could claim the show spoke directly to them. Modern horoscopes, personality types, even certain corporate trainings all follow the same formula. Give people a universal statement that feels personal, and they'll carry it like a private letter. It's a magic trick that doesn't wear out because it plays on something constant, our hunger to be seen. And of course, the funny part, you laugh at horoscopes until one nails you so well, you screenshot it and send it to friends. "This is literally me," you say, as if the universe carved a prophecy for your Starbucks order. Or you roll your eyes at online quizzes, then quietly share the result that tells you you're the loyal one or the visionary. Your brain basically high-fives itself for being so unique, while secretly following the same script as everyone else. Even skeptics, armed with knowledge of the bias, still fall into it, because the pull of recognition is sweeter than cynicism. Everyday life is full of these moments. Job feedback, couched in generic praise, feels surprisingly specific. You work well with others, because you remember that one meeting where you smoothed over a conflict. Advertising leans hard on this too. Slogans like, "You deserve better," or "You're stronger than you think," aren't meant for an individual. They're meant for anyone. Yet the Barnum effect makes you nod, tuck the message into your pocket, and believe it was addressed only to you. But here's the softer side. Maybe the Barnum effect isn't just a trick. Maybe the reason it works so well is because we are looking for echoes of ourselves in the world. Maybe vague words give us space to project what we need to hear. When someone says, "You have potential," it lands not because it's profound, but because it gives your own half-buried hopes a little oxygen. Generic words can still be a doorway. Tonight, the Barnum effect slips into something gentler. These words could apply to anyone, but right now, they feel like they're for you. You're sometimes restless, sometimes calm, sometimes tangled in your own thoughts. Yet, here you are, listening, softening, drifting. Generic? Maybe. Personal? Absolutely. Because meaning isn't only in the words, it's in the way you let them fit your life. And tonight, their meaning is simple. You're allowed to rest, you're allowed to let go, and you're allowed to believe the words really do belong to you. The peak end rule. Why we remember the highs and lows most. Think back on your last vacation. You probably don't recall every ordinary lunch or every taxi ride, but you do remember the dazzling sunset on day 3 and the frustratingly delayed flight home. That's the peak end rule at work. Your brain edits long experiences down to just 2 things: the most intense moment and the way it ended. Everything else blurs into background static. Mainstream psychology confirms this in clever experiments. People asked to rate painful procedures often judge them as less bad when the discomfort lingered a bit longer, but ended more gently. The average pain didn't matter. The ending wrote the story. Your memory isn't an accurate accountant. It's a dramatic film editor who wants a highlight reel. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman called it the difference between the experiencing self, the one living in the moment, and the remembering self, the one who remembers, one writing the diary afterward. The remembering self is picky, and it doesn't care about the full runtime. It just wants the best scene and a decent fade out. Quirky tidbit. Roller coasters are designed with this in mind. The steepest drop or sharpest turn, the peak, paired with a smooth glide back to the platform, the end, make you remember the ride as better than it actually was. You forget the clunky middle, the squeaky brakes, the kids screaming behind you. All that fades in service of the storyline. Movie directors know it too. An average film with a strong finale gets higher ratings than a steady but bland one. Advertisers pile fireworks into the last seconds of a commercial because they know the end glows brighter in your memory than the middle. Scientists still argue whether the peak end rule is adaptive storytelling or a bias that distorts reality. Is it helpful that we compress messy events into a digestible narrative? Or does it trick us into making lopsided decisions? Think of relationships. You might stick around because of one unforgettable high and one sweet goodbye, while forgetting all the middling grey in between. Or consider vacations. We return home declaring, best trip ever. Even if most of it was humid walks, lost luggage, and mosquito bites. Because there was one spectacular hike and a lovely dinner on the last night. Our remembering self edits kindly, if unevenly. On the fringe, some researchers whisper that life satisfaction itself might hinge less on daily averages and more on the stories crafted by peaks and endings. Two people could live equally long, equally stable lives. But if one had more glittering peaks and graceful closes, they might look back and feel it was richer. It's not about living well every moment. It's about editing the real convincingly. Philosophers even suggest this bias shapes entire cultures. Festivals, rituals, and grand finales serve to punctuate existence with peaks and goodbyes that linger, giving life a sense of cohesion even when the middle is ordinary. Everyday examples are everywhere. Restaurants bring out a complimentary dessert on the house, not just for generosity, but because they want your evening to end sweet. Theme parks save the most dramatic fireworks for the close, ensuring your last memory sparkles brighter than the long lines and overpriced soda. Even work presentations are judged less by the body and more by the final slide and tone of the closer. Endings write the verdict, not averages. And of course, the humor. This is why people rave about a concert with 2 good songs and a killer encore. The whole middle might have been forgettable, but the last song had fireworks. Your brain doesn't write reviews, it writes trailers. Best night ever, it claims, ignoring the part where you stood in line for overpriced nachos and lost feeling in your legs. It's also why bad dates remembered with a funny, awkward goodbye sometimes get a second chance. Your memory tagged it as weird but charming, even though most of the dinner was awkward silence. The irony is that the peak end rule makes us both irrational and resilient. We overvalue highs and endings, but in doing so, we often look back more fondly than reality deserves. The average Tuesday may be a blur, but a single glowing laugh or a peaceful close can rewrite the whole page. In a way, it's merciful. Life becomes more bearable when we remember the storybook version instead of the spreadsheet. Tonight, as you lie here, the peak end rule is already rewriting your day. You may forget the dozens of little tasks, but you'll hold on to the sharpest emotion and the way you close this evening. If you let that ending be soft, calm, and restful, your brain will file the day away under good. You don't need fireworks or grand finales. Sometimes the gentle close of breath slowing, sheets warming, and thoughts fading is enough to trick memory into kindness. And maybe, when you wake, that will be the story you remember. The sunk cost fallacy. Why we keep investing in losing causes. You sit through a terrible movie, halfway in, whispering to yourself, I've already wasted an hour. I might as well finish it. That's the sunk cost fallacy. The tendency to keep pouring time, money, or energy into something simply because you've already invested, even when quitting would be smarter. It's like dragging a leaky boat farther out to sea just because you already patched one hole. Mainstream economics explains this as irrational persistence. Rationally, past costs are gone, unrecoverable. What matters is whether continuing adds future value. But your brain hates admitting loss, so it throws good effort after bad, hoping to justify the initial choice. You don't just want payoff, you want your past self to be right. To walk away feels like betraying the person you were when you said yes, and nobody likes calling themselves a fool. Quirky tidbit. Theme parks know this. Visitors will wait in absurdly long lines, not because the ride is worth it, but because they already spent 20 minutes queuing. Might as well stick it out, you mutter, sweating under the sun. Psychologists note that the longer you wait, the harder it is to bail, even as misery grows. Casinos exploit it too. You've already put so much into the machine. What's another round? Maybe the next pull is redemption. In reality, it's the past investment chaining you to the stool. Scientists still argue whether the sunk cost fallacy is purely a flaw or sometimes a motivator. Is it just a mental trap, or does it occasionally drive persistence that pays off? After all, some projects that looked doomed early on later bloomed because people refused to quit. Entrepreneurs, inventors, and artists sometimes stumble through failure after failure before striking gold. If they had cut losses too soon, the breakthrough would never have come. Maybe the line between waste and grit is blurrier than we think. A trap in one case, resilience in another. On the fringe, some researchers suggest sunk costs are less about money and more about identity. Walking away doesn't just mean losing resources. It means admitting I was wrong back then. People stay in unhappy jobs or partnerships, telling themselves, I've put in years, I can't walk away now. Economists shake their heads, but emotionally, the logic feels real. Abandoning it feels like throwing away part of your life story. The cost isn't just sunk time, it's a sunk version of yourself. Letting go can feel like erasing a chapter, even if it frees you to start a better one. History is littered with grand examples. Wars prolonged because nations didn't want to admit defeat after years of sacrifice. Corporations clinging to doomed technologies, insisting they'll pay off if they just throw in more funding. Even governments building half-empty mega-projects unwilling to say, we spent billions and it was a mistake. Whole civilizations sometimes fall to sunk costs, refusing to turn the ship when the iceberg is already in sight. And the joke practically writes itself. Think of your fridge. That jar of artisanal jam you bought for $12, hated after one bite, but still keep for months. You won't eat it, but you can't toss it, because that $12 has you in a hostage situation. Or that gym membership you never use, but keep paying because I might go next week. Your fridge, your closet, your bank statement. They're all little museums of sunk costs. Everyday life hums with smaller examples. You keep reading a book you don't like because you already slogged through 200 pages. You keep wearing uncomfortable shoes because they were expensive. You keep scrolling through a boring show season because you love season 1. Rationally, you'd stop. Emotionally, you whisper, "I've come this far." It's not efficiency, it's ego management. And yet, there's a strange kindness hidden in the fallacy. Sometimes, the refusal to quit gives us good stories, shared experiences, even lessons we didn't expect. Sticking it out isn't always wise, but it isn't always wasted either. The trick is knowing when persistence is passion, and when it's just stubborn bookkeeping. Tonight, though, you can release this fallacy. The day is done, the hours already spent. Nothing you think about in bed can undo or reclaim them. And that's strangely freeing. No need to push, to finish, to justify. You can close the tab on today and let the investment fade into rest. Tomorrow is fresh currency. And for once, you don't have to squeeze value out of the past. You just have to let yourself be carried by the softness of this ending, which, by the peak end rule, might be all that matters. The endowment effect. Why we value what we own more than what we don't. You buy a mug for $5, and the next day someone offers you $10 for it. Strangely, you hesitate. That's the endowment effect. Once something is yours, its value inflates in your mind. Ownership isn't just possession, it's attachment. And suddenly, a cheap mug feels like part of your empire. It isn't about the ceramic. It's about the invisible line your brain drew around it the moment it crossed into your orbit. Mainstream psychology shows this again and again. People given random objects in experiments consistently demand more money to sell them than they'd ever pay to buy them. The act of owning wires the brain to upgrade the worth, as if your fingerprints alone turned it into treasure. Kahneman and Thaler, giants of behavioral economics, use this to show how irrational humans can be. Rationally, value should be the same on either side of a trade. But once ownership kicks in, the scale tips, and suddenly the mug you didn't even want yesterday feels irreplaceable today. A quirky tidbit. Sports fans often overprice their tickets for resale. A seat they bought for $50 magically feels worth $200 once it's in their possession. They're not lying. Their brain genuinely perceives it as more valuable. Ownership bends the ruler of worth. The same happens with houses. People overestimate the unique charm of their home, while buyers see peeling paint. Even toddlers reveal the effect. Try to take away a random toy, and suddenly it becomes the most beloved treasure in the universe. Scientists still argue whether this effect is purely psychological or also evolutionary. Did humans evolve to overvalue possessions because holding onto tools, weapons, or food meant survival? Or is it modern culture exaggerating the grip, teaching us that property defines identity? The arguments stack up like the clutter in your garage. Evolutionary psychologists say clinging to objects made sense when resources were scarce. You didn't abandon a spear because a better one might never appear. But in today's world, that ancient clinginess gets hijacked by IKEA furniture and clearance sale sweaters. Fringe whispers say the endowment effect stretches to ideas too. Once you claim an opinion, it feels like it belongs to you. Giving it up, even in the face of better evidence, feels like losing property. That's why debates rarely change minds. People aren't just defending beliefs, they're defending perceived assets. My opinion is treated like my house. To let it go is to feel dispossessed. This helps explain why arguments about politics or identity become so heated. They're not mere exchanges of thought, but perceived thefts of something owned. Culture cashes in on this everywhere. Limited edition sneakers, collectible toys, special packaging. Once you hold it, it becomes yours and therefore priceless. Video games hook into the effect, making you grind for digital items that exist only as code. The moment you earn them, you wouldn't dream of trading them away cheaply. Marketers know. Get something into your hands, literally, and your brain does the rest. That's why free samples and trial periods are so effective. Touch it, taste it, hold it, and suddenly it's part of you. And the light-hearted bit, think about that t-shirt you never wear but refuse to donate. It's mine, you mutter, as if your closet is Fort Knox. Never mind that it hasn't touched daylight in years. The mere fact it's yours makes it sacred. Or that drawer of ancient phone chargers you keep just in case, as if one day you'll stumble on a relic phone from 2007 and be the chosen one who still has the cable. Your brain is basically Gollum from Lord of the Rings, whispering, "My precious," over discount cotton and tangled wires. History even tells the tale. Ancient rulers stamped coins with their faces, not just for economy but psychology. Once people owned a coin with the king's likeness, loyalty to the system deepened. Wars were fought not just for land, but for the psychic pull of ours versus theirs. Endowment doesn't stop at mugs, it scales up to empires. But here's the softer truth. The endowment effect isn't always harmful. It means your surroundings, your blanket, your pillow, even the worn objects by your bed, carry extra weight simply because they're yours. The chipped mug on your nightstand holds more than tea. It holds mornings and memories. The familiar creak in your chair is more than wood. It's your hours, your presence pressed into it. And as you lie here now, you can let that attachment feel like comfort. The world outside may be full of shiny things, but in this moment, what you own, the space, the stillness, the night, is already enough. The endowment effect, for once, isn't a bias to fight. It's a lullaby sung by your possessions, reminding you that you are surrounded by things that belong to you, and therefore, things that belong with you. Mere ownership effect. Why we hold on to things we don't need. That keychain from a gas station in 2009. You don't use it, you don't even like it, yet you keep it tucked in a drawer like it's a relic. That's the mere ownership effect. The simple fact of possessing something makes it harder to let go, even when it's objectively useless. Ownership alone plants a quiet flag in your psyche. This is mine, and therefore it matters. Mainstream psychology draws a subtle line here. The endowment effect inflates value. The mere ownership effect builds attachment. Even if the object has no market worth, ownership alone gives it a strange emotional glow. Once it's yours, parting feels like loss, as if you're tearing away a thread from your own sweater. The keychain isn't just metal. It's a tiny fossil of who you were the day you bought it. A quirky tidbit. Experiments show people resist giving up trinkets handed to them moments earlier, even if they didn't choose them. The object becomes part of my stuff, and suddenly my stuff feels different from stuff. The word might act like superglue on the psyche. Even monkeys show this tendency in lab tests, clutching random objects they're handed as though they have meaning. Ownership casts a spell across species, turning the ordinary into something almost sacred. Scientists still argue whether this is adaptive sentimentality or wasteful bias. Is it evolution nudging you to guard resources in case they're useful later? Or just mental clutter, convincing you that every cracked mug or broken remote is part of your identity? The debate leaves psychologists staring at their own office junk piles, chuckling at the irony. We've always been creatures who stash things just in case. In a pre-industrial world, keeping bits of string and spare parts was survival. In a modern one, it's a drawer full of mystery cables. The fringe perspective gets even stranger. Some suggest mere ownership explains hoarding tendencies. Every scrap, every item feels woven into the self. Discarding them doesn't feel like tidying up. It feels like erasing pieces of memory. The attachment is irrational but deeply human. Memory itself may be encoded in objects, so throwing them out feels like throwing away proof you existed, a breadcrumb trail of your own narrative. Anthropologists even see echoes of this in burial goods and ancient storage pits, evidence that we've always treated objects as extensions of ourselves. Culture capitalizes on this effect. Free giveaways, promotional pens, branded tote bags. Companies know that once you're holding it, you'll keep it. Museums sell inexpensive trinkets in their gift shops because you want a piece of the experience to take home. The item itself might be trivial, but your brain links it to the moment. My souvenir, my memory, my proof I was there. Suddenly, a $5 magnet becomes priceless because it's stamped with my trip. And here's a playful aside. Your junk drawer isn't really about utility. It's a shrine to the mere ownership effect. Half-dead batteries, mismatched screws, a phone charger for a model you ditched years ago. You know you'll never use them, but tossing them feels wrong. Your brain acts like you're breaking up with them. Even digital life mirrors this. Endless files saved just in case, apps you never open but won't delete. Unread emails kept like digital relics. The mere fact that you clicked download once makes them yours, and yours means harder to discard. History shows the same impulse on a grand scale. Ancient temples filled with offerings no one would ever reclaim. Monarchs hoarding treasures not for use, but for the aura of ownership. Even modern billionaires collecting art, yachts, or entire islands rarely use them as much as they like having them. Ownership isn't about utility. It's about psychic territory. And yet, this bias isn't only a trap. The mere ownership effect means your surroundings, your blanket, your pillow, the little objects on your nightstand, carry extra weight simply because they're yours. That attachment can be soothing. The chipped mug you always use for tea, the book you've read 3 times, the sweater that's a little worn at the elbows. These aren't just items. They're a sense of continuity, anchors in a shifting world. Tonight, though, you can see this bias with softer eyes. You don't have to empty the drawer or force yourself to let go. Instead, you can notice how your surroundings are sprinkled with echoes of mine and take comfort in them. They may not all be useful, but they're yours. They're evidence of your story, your path, your hands. And as you rest, even the clutter around you feels like a quiet chorus saying, "You belong here." In a world full of things you don't control, this little space, these small possessions, and this moment are already yours. And that's enough to soften into sleep. The IKEA effect. Why we value things more when we build them ourselves. You spend an hour wrestling with an instruction sheet that looks like it was drawn by a cryptic monk, screwing wooden pegs into mismatched holes. By the end, you've built a lopsided bookshelf, and yet you love it. That's the IKEA effect. People overvalue things they've created, even when the craftsmanship screams wobbly at best. You could have bought something sturdier, straighter, better built, but your fingerprints on the process make the outcome glow. Mainstream psychology confirms this bias in clever experiments. Participants asked to fold origami rated their wrinkled paper cranes as worth nearly as much as professionally folded ones. Outsiders, of course, disagreed. But to the builders, the effort itself inflated value. Work was alchemy, turning cheap paper into prized art. Economist Dan Ariely and his colleagues coined the term after studies on IKEA furniture. But the effect is ancient. Labor doesn't just produce objects, it produces affection. Here's a quirky tidbit. This doesn't just apply to crafts. Baking your own cake makes it taste sweeter. Assembling your own PC makes it feel faster. And typing your own notes makes them stickier in memory. Effort transforms perception. The brain secretly tags sweat equity as worth. That's why some assembly required doesn't always hurt sales. Sometimes it increases them. The moment you put work into something, you stop being a customer and start being a co-creator. Scientists still argue whether the IKEA effect is pride or survival wiring. Is it just ego? I made this, so it must be good. Or is there an evolutionary benefit to loving what you build, ensuring you keep tools and shelters in good repair? Anthropologists point out that for most of human history, nearly everything you owned was handmade by you or your group. If you didn't value the rough hut or clumsy spear you made, you'd abandon it, and survival would collapse. Perhaps the bias isn't vanity, but ancient glue, keeping humans committed to their own work. On the fringe side, some researchers stretch this to parenting and projects. You see your own kids, businesses, or ideas through IKEA tinted glasses. They may be messy, imperfect, sometimes exasperating, but you've poured work into them, so they shine brighter in your eyes than in anyone else's. Love and effort blur into one. The IKEA effect whispers that the hours you've poured in must mean something, and so the meaning appears, stitched right into the imperfections. Culture exploits this too. Restaurants that make you finish your own meal, adding toppings, assembling wraps, know you'll value the food more. Video games with customizable avatars hook into the same psychology. You like your pixelated warrior more because you shaped them. Even corporate retreats that force employees to build things together tap into it. Shared sweat creates shared pride. And in a digital age, think of playlists or photo collages. They're not objectively superior, but because you curated them, they feel golden. And here's the cheeky example. Ever tried to show off furniture you built yourself? Friends nod politely while secretly worrying the chair will collapse under them. To you, though, it's heirloom quality. Or that home-cooked dish where you forgot the salt but still insist, it's actually really good. Your brain basically hands you a gold medal for surviving an Allen wrench and a recipe card. In fact, the harder the struggle, the more you cherish the outcome. A cruel joke of psychology, where frustration becomes seasoning. History shows this bias everywhere. Ancient artisans prized their handiwork not just for function, but because effort itself imbued sacredness. Medieval guilds guarded their crafts like treasures. Even early religions often tied labor to love. What you make with your own hands is holier. The IKEA effect may be modern in name, but its roots dig back through centuries of human pride in making. But here's the soft side. The IKEA effect isn't always a distortion. It can be a source of meaning. If you've ever kept a child's crooked drawing on the fridge or treasured a handmade gift, you've lived it. Perfection wasn't the point. Participation was. What you build, you bond with. What you labor over, you love a little more. Tonight, the IKEA effect shifts from sawdust to serenity. You've built this evening for yourself, the choice to listen, the effort to slow down, the act of resting. And because you've put your own hands into shaping this moment, it carries extra weight. It's your imperfect, handmade calm, creaky at the edges, but sturdy enough to hold you. Like the wobbly bookshelf, it doesn't have to impress anyone else. It only has to serve you. And tonight, it does. Gently, quietly, enough to cradle you towards sleep. The foot in the door phenomenon. How small requests lead to bigger ones. A neighbor asks if you'd sign a petition for cleaner parks. You say yes. It's quick, painless. A week later, they're back asking if you'll volunteer Saturday morning to pick up trash. And somehow, you say yes again. That's the foot in the door phenomenon. Once you've agreed to something small, you're far more likely to agree to something bigger that follows. The first yes plants a seed, the second grows roots. Mainstream psychology ties this to consistency. We like our actions to match our self-image. If you say yes to the petition, you start thinking of yourself as the kind of person who helps the community. Saying no to the next request would feel like betraying that new self-concept. So you comply, not with force, but with gentle nudges. Humans have a deep need to appear coherent, to others, but especially to ourselves. Once your story starts, you don't want to contradict the narrator. Quirky tidbit. A classic study had researchers ask homeowners to display a small sticker in their window supporting safe driving. Later, when asked to put a giant ugly billboard in their front yard, those who'd agreed to the sticker were much more likely to say yes. One tiny foot in the door turned into a giant sign on the lawn. It wasn't the billboard that persuaded them. It was their own earlier choice, echoing back, whispering, "This is who you are now." Scientists still argue whether this effect stems from self-perception, changing how you see yourself, or social obligation, where saying yes once makes you feel bound to continue. Either way, the snowball is real. The first step is rarely the last. Social psychologists note that it isn't just about persuasion. It's about identity construction. Each small compliance shapes a narrative. I am helpful. I am loyal. I am supportive. That narrative becomes harder to break the further it goes. On the fringe, some suggest this phenomenon can even explain radicalization or cult involvement. Small commitments stack up, pulling people deeper into systems they never would have agreed to if asked outright. You don't wake up and decide to hand over your life savings or cut off old friends. But you might first agree to a meeting, then a workshop, then a donation. Each step feels reasonable in isolation, but the path only reveals itself in hindsight. It's not a leap off a cliff. It's a staircase you didn't realize you were climbing. Culture plays with this effect constantly. Marketing thrives on it. Just sign up for our free trial, they say. Once your email is in, they nudge you toward upgrades. Charities ask for a small pledge, then follow up with a larger request. Even relationships lean on it. First you agree to dinner, then a weekend away, then meeting the parents. Step by step, the yeses accumulate until you've built an entire commitment out of small bricks. And here's the humor. Ever agreed to just help move a few boxes for a friend? Next thing you know, you're hauling an entire sofa up 3 flights of stairs. Your brain justifies it. Well, I already said yes, so now I'm basically a professional mover. Or when someone asks, "Can you proofread this 1 page?" And suddenly, you're editing their whole 30-page thesis. The foot in the door doesn't just wedge, it kicks wide open. History shows this bias writ large. Social movements often spread not by massive demands, but by tiny initial commitments. Wearing a pin, signing a pledge, attending a rally. Once people invested, even in small ways, they felt more bound to the cause. Businesses, too, built empires on installment plans and incremental purchases. A small yes that leads to loyalty for decades. Even armies knew this. Once a recruit agreed to just training, the march into combat was easier to justify. And yet, the foot in the door isn't purely manipulative. It also works for growth and self-improvement. Say yes to a single push-up, and it may lead to a workout. Say yes to 5 minutes of writing, and you might finish a chapter. Say yes to flossing one tooth, and before you know it, your whole mouth is cleaner. Behavioral scientists now recommend tiny habits, small commitments that naturally open the door to larger changes. Sometimes a trick of psychology is also a tool of progress. Tonight, though, no one is nudging you toward heavier tasks. The only small yes you've given is to rest. And like the phenomenon promises, one small yes can grow into something larger. An hour of sleep, a night of calm, a deeper renewal than you planned. You don't have to commit to 8 solid hours right now. Just commit to this breath, this softness, this moment of letting go. The foot's already in the door. Now let the rest of you walk gently through into quiet. The door in the face technique. The power of rejection in persuasion. A fundraiser asks if you'll donate $500 to their cause. You laugh, shake your head, and say no. Seconds later, they ask if you could give just $20 instead. Suddenly, that feels easy, even generous, and you say yes. That's the door in the face technique, starting with an outrageous request so the smaller one looks irresistible by comparison. The first no wasn't failure, it was choreography. Mainstream psychology explains it through contrast and reciprocity. The first ask stretches the scale so the second feels modest. Plus, when someone concedes by lowering their request, you feel pressure to reciprocate by agreeing. It's not persuasion by logic, it's persuasion by rhythm. The shrinking of the request feels like a gift, and your brain, eager to be fair, wants to return the gesture with a yes. Even when you know the trick, the pull still tugs, as if fairness itself is hijacked by an invisible metronome keeping the beat of social exchange. Quirky tidbit. Studies show this works even with children. Teens asked to volunteer 2 years all refused, but when the request shrank to one afternoon, compliance skyrocketed. The absurd opener wasn't wasted breath. It was the lever that made the small ask irresistible. Modern businesses know the script. Streaming services offer their platinum package first, so the mid-tier plan looks cheap. Gyms dangle personal training bundles before you feel relieved to sign for just the regular membership. Restaurants list a $200 bottle of wine, not because they expect you to buy it, but because it makes the $60 bottle seem like a sensible indulgence. Online shopping carts do the same. Compare at prices anchor your brain so a discount feels like a victory you earned. Scientists still argue whether the effect is manipulative trickery or simply a social norm. Ancient markets thrived on the same ritual. Merchants expected you to haggle, inflating their first offer so the final price landed where they wanted. Diplomats use it too, opening with demands no one could accept, then stepping down to their real agenda. Was it deception? Or just the old art of compromise written into human interaction? On the fringe, researchers note that this trick can even reshape identity. Saying yes to the smaller request doesn't just end the transaction. It reshapes how you see yourself. You gave $20 not because you were pressured, but because you're the kind of person who helps. The donation becomes less about money and more about story. Once the self-image is set, it lingers, influencing later choices long after the fundraiser walked away. And of course, the joke. Your friend offers to cook a 7-course dinner with wine pairings. You decline, overwhelmed. They sigh and say, "Fine, just pasta and salad." You agree, relieved, never realizing pasta was the plan all along. Parents play the same card. Clean the garage. No way. Fine, just clean your room. The kid thinks they escaped, never realizing the room was the goal from the start. Even partners do it. "Let's remodel the whole house." You panic. "Fine, just the bathroom." And suddenly, you're shopping for tile on Saturday. The comedy lies in how willingly we walk into the script, grateful for a reprieve that was always the real destination. History offers countless echoes. Ancient storytellers used the device to frame quests. The hero was asked for the impossible, then given a smaller task that still felt noble. Negotiators in kingdoms and courts inflated initial terms before softening. Even religion and ritual sometimes echo the same rhythm. Ask for everything, then grant the faithful a lighter, merciful burden. The mind loves the feeling of relief, and that relief becomes agreement. But here's the softer twist. It isn't always manipulation. Sometimes we can borrow this bias to make life gentler. You say no to the impossible marathon, then yes to a single walk. No to finishing a novel tonight, but yes to a paragraph. The first ask is too big, but the second becomes a kindness. A trick you pull on yourself to make progress possible. Framed this way, the technique becomes less a scheme to win your wallet and more a strategy to coax momentum when willpower falters. Tonight, though, there's no bargaining, no staged retreat. The only smaller request is simple. Close your eyes a little longer. Breathe a little deeper. Compared to everything you carried today, that's not a demand, it's a gift. And saying yes costs nothing, yet yields the richest return. Rest. The day may have opened with impossible asks, but this evening can close with the smallest, kindest one, simply letting go. The Ben Franklin effect. Why doing favors makes you like someone more? A rival politician once disliked Benjamin Franklin. Instead of confronting him, Franklin asked to borrow a rare book from the man's library. The rival, oddly flattered, agreed. After returning the book with gratitude, Franklin noticed the man's hostility had softened. That's the Ben Franklin effect. When you do someone a favor, you start liking them more, not less, because your brain needs to justify why you helped. Mainstream psychology explains it through cognitive dissonance. If you do something kind for someone you don't like, your mind scrambles to close the gap. Well, maybe I do like them. Otherwise, why would I help? So your opinion shifts to match your action, rewriting dislike into warmth. In this way, action quietly shapes affection, and generosity becomes evidence. Your behavior isn't just a signal to others, it's a signal to yourself. Here's a quirky tidbit. Experiments back this up. Students asked to lend a book or perform a small favor for someone rated that person more positively afterward than students who did nothing. Weirdly, giving help forged stronger bonds than receiving it. Your brain ties kindness to liking, even when the order is backward. Imagine how odd that is. You feel more warmth towards someone because you help them. It's as if the favor plants roots of fondness where none existed before. A strange seed that blossoms in the soil of your own effort. Scientists still argue whether this effect is about dissonance or about identity. Do we help and then decide we must like someone? Or do we see ourselves as generous and adjust feelings to keep that self-image intact? Either way, favors shape affections, not just outcomes. And the loop is sticky. Once you see yourself as helpful, you're more likely to repeat the behavior, reinforcing both the bond and the story you tell about who you are. History is dotted with echoes of this maneuver. Leaders have asked enemies for small courtesies, not grand alliances, knowing that minor favors melt ice faster than treaties. Writers, too, borrowed Franklin's trick, requesting critiques, manuscript notes, or introductions to soften critics into collaborators. Even ancient communities practiced it. Villagers would ask neighbors for simple help, fetching water, tending animals, because shared labor created trust. Helping was the glue, and the liking followed naturally. Modern life is no different. Offices hum with little Ben Franklin effects. A co-worker asks you to proofread a paragraph, and suddenly you feel more bonded to them. A neighbor requests you water their plants, and the next time you see them, you wave with genuine fondness. Tech companies even hack this bias. Apps ask you to contribute tiny actions, upvotes, ratings, feedback, and with every small favor you grant, you become more invested in the platform itself. You like it more because you've already helped it survive. Even friendships online echo the same rhythm. Share a meme, answer a quick question, click yes to a poll, and suddenly strangers feel like allies. On the fringe, researchers note this effect might explain why volunteering and altruism often feel addictive. Helping isn't just about the receiver. It reinforces your bond with humanity itself. Every good deed loops back, making the world, and the people in it, seem more likable. Charities sometimes lean into this subtly, asking not for money first, but for time, a signature, or even a smile. Once you've given something of yourself, your heart follows, softening into generosity. And here's the light joke. Think about lending a pen. Someone borrows it, returns it, and suddenly you're convinced they're not just a classmate, but a trustworthy ally. Meanwhile, you've had pens stolen by people you loved, and somehow that didn't make you hate them. Your brain applies Franklin's law selectively, as if stationery decides friendships. It's irrational, but endearing. A reminder that sometimes our minds care less about logic and more about keeping the story consistent. But the real twist is this. The Ben Franklin effect isn't only outward. You can turn it inward too. Tonight, you don't need to lend or borrow anything. By simply giving yourself the small favor of time, you create the same loop within. When you grant your body rest, or your mind a pause, you reinforce the story that you are worth caring for. The act of kindness toward your tired self makes you like yourself a little more. And in that quiet loop, you settle deeper, wrapped in the favor of rest, a bond with yourself that strengthens each time you say yes to gentle care. And maybe that's Franklin's secret gift, proving that favors, no matter how small, can soften not just enemies, but the walls we build inside ourselves. The false consensus effect. Thinking everyone thinks like you taste pineapple on pizza and declare, obviously, everyone loves this. Except, half the room looks at you like you've committed culinary treason. That mismatch is the false consensus effect. Your tendency to assume your own preferences, opinions, and habits are the default for humanity. Mainstream psychology explains this as a mental shortcut. Believing others share your views makes the world feel predictable and safe. If you recycle, you imagine most people do. If you secretly binge reality TV, you comfort yourself with, well, everyone probably does it. Your brain craves consensus, even when none exists. It's less about arrogance than efficiency, assuming you're normal. Spares the exhausting task of checking where you stand on every issue. Quirky tidbit. Studies show people who cheat on tests think cheating is common, while those who study hard believe honesty is the norm. In both cases, individuals project their own behavior onto the crowd, turning my choice into our choice. Smokers, for example, drastically overestimate the number of people who smoke. Vegetarians often assume the world is shifting faster toward plant-based diets than it actually is. Even procrastinators guess that most people put things off, which feels comforting when your essay is still unwritten at midnight. Scientists still argue whether the false consensus effect is driven by ego or environment. Do we project because it feels good to believe we're normal, or because our social circles echo our views back at us? Maybe both. If everyone around you votes a certain way, watches a certain show, or laughs at a certain meme, you start assuming the whole world must be in sync. Social media turbocharges this. Algorithms feed you like-minded content until your digital neighborhood feels like the entire city. Scroll long enough, and you'll swear the whole planet loves your favorite band or despises your least favorite politician. In truth, you're floating inside a carefully built echo bubble. On the fringe, some researchers whisper that this bias fuels polarization. If you think everyone agrees with me, then opposition feels outrageous, even threatening. The illusion of consensus builds echo chambers, each convinced they're the mainstream. That's why debates so often feel like collisions of two obvious truths. Each side baffled the other even exists. Pineapple wars, scaled up to politics, ignite culture clashes where neither side can imagine the other's worldview as legitimate. History offers colorful echoes. Ancient philosophers warned against assuming common sense was universal. Yet even kings and councils fell prey to it. Rulers who believed their policies had unanimous support often marched into revolts. Explorers assumed their customs were natural, misreading foreign practices as oddities instead of norms, even in literature. Characters routinely project their private beliefs outward. Shakespeare's fools and nobles alike assume their vices or virtues are shared, often to comic or tragic effect. Modern workplaces brim with the same bias. A manager who thrives on early mornings assumes their team prefers dawn meetings. A programmer who loves dark mode imagines the whole office must loathe bright screens. Marketers gamble on everyone wants this feature, only to discover the crowd didn't. Designers, politicians, even parents, all risk mistaking their lens for the world's. This bias doesn't just skew perception. It quietly shapes policy, products, and conversations. But there's a softer side too. False consensus can smooth awkward edges of belonging. If you believe everyone's a little nervous at parties, your own jitters feel less isolating. Thinking everyone messes up sometimes can cushion failure with humanity. In small doses, the illusion comforts. The danger is forgetting it's an illusion at all. And here's the playful jab. Ever confidently quote a classic movie line, expecting the whole room to join in, then realize no one's seen it, and you're performing to crickets. Or hum a song chorus waiting for the sing-along, only to get blank stares. The false consensus effect just left you hanging, popcorn in hand, karaoke soloist of one. Still, there's freedom in recognizing it. Not everyone thinks like you. Not everyone shares your quirks, and that's fine. Consensus isn't required for meaning. Difference adds texture. Disagreement keeps the world colorful. The real trick is remembering that obvious is often just personal. So tonight, you can smile at the illusion. You don't need everyone to recycle the same way, to laugh at the same joke, or to savor pineapple on their pizza. Here, in this quiet moment, consensus isn't necessary. The only opinion that matters is the one whispering in your own head that it's safe to let go, close your eyes, and drift into sleep. And unlike pineapple debates, no one will argue with that. The curse of knowledge. Why experts struggle to simplify things. You ask a tech-savvy friend how to fix your Wi-Fi, and they launch into jargon about routers, packets, and bandwidth like you're earning a degree. You just wanted the magic button. That frustration is the curse of knowledge. Once someone knows something deeply, they forget what it's like not to know it, making explanations confusing or overwhelming. Mainstream psychology illustrates this with a clever experiment. People asked to tap out simple tunes like "Happy Birthday" expected listeners to recognize them half the time. In reality, listeners only guessed correctly about 2%. To the tappers, the melody was obvious. To the hearers, it was random tapping. Knowledge distorted perspective. Once you know the song, you can't unhear it. Just as once you know the answer to a riddle, it's nearly impossible to imagine the puzzle from a beginner's eyes. A quirky tidbit. Professors writing exam questions consistently overestimate how easy students will find them. Once you master material, your brain can't rewind to beginner mode. That's why instructions often read like puzzles, leaving you muttering, "Who wrote this, and do they hate humans?" Engineers, doctors, lawyers, all guilty. Even recipes suffer the curse. Reduce until done. Done when? Done how? Everyday life teems with examples. Programmers explain code as if everyone thinks in loops and arrays. Gamers hand controllers to friends, forgetting the steep curve of camera controls. Parents stumble when teaching children skills they've long automated, tying shoes, riding bikes, telling time. It's easy, they insist, baffled that the learner struggles. Easy for the expert, invisible for the novice. Scientists still argue whether the curse of knowledge is an unavoidable side effect of expertise, or if it can be unlearned. Can teachers truly bridge the gap, or does knowledge always create a blind spot? Some argue empathy is the antidote, pausing to imagine the mental world of the learner. Others believe practice helps. Skilled communicators rehearse simplifying without condescending. Still, the jury is out, probably buried in footnotes only other jurors understand. History offers striking illustrations. Philosophers wrote in dense, tangled prose, leaving students centuries later to puzzle out meaning. Mathematicians assumed their proofs were self-evident, even when they required leaps of abstraction. Politicians drafting laws often overlook how cryptic their language feels to readers. Adults forget the difficulty of childhood milestones, what it felt like to sound out letters or memorize multiplication tables. Expertise builds walls of fluency, making it hard to recall the struggle of learning. Fringe speculation suggests this bias may explain why revolutions in science often come from outsiders. Insiders are so entangled in complexity they can't explain or rethink the basics. Fresh eyes see what the cursed overlook. Progress sometimes requires ignorance as much as insight. Einstein credited part of his breakthroughs to imagining riding on a beam of light instead of relying on dense equations. In art, too, amateurs spark movements because they don't know the rules well enough to feel shackled by them. Ignorance, it seems, has creative leverage. Modern technology amplifies the curse. User manuals assume fluency in features you've never heard of. Customer support scripts lean on acronyms, leaving callers stranded. Even search engines return results written by experts for experts. And in social media debates, people toss around statistics or legal terms as if everyone else has read the same footnotes. The gap between knower and newcomer yawns wide, and frustration fills the space. And here's the light joke. Ever tried teaching your grandparents to use emojis? You say, just tap the smiley, and they stare at you like you've asked them to rewire a spaceship. You forget that once you too were baffled by that tiny keyboard. Or kids teaching parents TikTok. They shout, "It's easy," while swiping at lightning speed, forgetting their fingers have lived in touchscreen worlds. The curse is contagious. But here's the gentler twist. The curse of knowledge is also a reminder of how far you've come. If you can't remember what it felt like not to know, it means you've mastered something once foreign. The trick is turning mastery into generosity, slowing down enough to re-enter beginner's shoes. Teaching, mentoring, even explaining directions to a stranger, all become little acts of translation, bridges over the curse. Tonight, though, there's no need for expertise. You don't have to explain, teach, or simplify. Knowledge can rest, and so can ignorance. All that matters is the simplicity of breath in, breath out. The kind of instruction no one misunderstands. Inhale, exhale, repeat. No jargon, no footnotes. Just the rhythm of being human, perfectly clear. The power of touch. How physical contact affects our emotions. A handshake seals a deal. A hug melts tension. And a pat on the shoulder can calm nerves better than a speech. That's the power of touch. The quiet, wordless force that shapes emotion and connection more deeply than we often admit. Mainstream psychology shows that physical contact lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, while boosting oxytocin, the so-called bonding chemical. That's why babies held frequently grow calmer, and why even adults crave hugs after tough days. Your nervous system listens to skin as much as to words. Even brief touches act like micro-messages. You're safe. You belong. I see you, quirky tidbit. In one experiment, waiters who gave diners a light touch on the arm while handing the bill received significantly larger tips. Customers didn't consciously notice the touch, but their brains translated it as warmth and attentiveness. Other studies show strangers are more likely to help when the request comes with a fleeting tap on the hand or shoulder. The effect is subtle, but measurable. Even money and generosity listen to touch. Scientists still argue whether this power is primarily cultural or biological. Do we respond to touch because we're conditioned by social norms, or because the body itself is hardwired to interpret it as safety? Anthropologists note that cultures vary. Mediterranean friends may greet with multiple kisses, while others value more distance. Yet the baseline need for contact exists everywhere. Neuroscience suggests that no matter the etiquette, skin-to-skin contact registers in brain regions tied to comfort and trust. The debate continues, but either way, the effect is undeniable. History offers echoes of this truth. Healers once laid hands on the sick as a first prescription. Kings staged royal touch ceremonies, believing their palms carried curative power. Religious rituals, baptisms, blessings, anointings, often involve direct touch as the visible sign of invisible grace. Even political leaders instinctively clasp hands, drape arms around allies, or touch shoulders in moments of reassurance. Across eras, power and care have both relied on the simple grammar of skin meeting skin. On the fringe side, some researchers whisper about therapeutic touch, the controversial idea that human hands can influence healing energies. While mainstream medicine rolls its eyes, the persistence of this practice suggests people feel something meaningful when touched with care, even if science hasn't fully explained it. Massage therapy, meanwhile, shows consistent results. Reduced anxiety, better sleep, even lowered blood pressure. Whatever energy may or may not exist, the body seems to respond. Everyday life provides its own proof. Sports teams celebrate with high fives and chest bumps, using touch to sync adrenaline and solidarity. Couples walk hand in hand, hearts regulating to a common rhythm. Parents ruffle kids' hair, signaling affection without a word. Even a firm handshake before a job interview can tilt first impressions. Touch is the invisible punctuation mark of social life. Commas, exclamation points, ellipses, shaping how sentences of interaction feel. And of course, the playful bit. Think about the way friends wrestle or give clumsy high fives. Even awkward, mistimed touches create laughter and connection. Your brain doesn't grade technique. It just translates contact into closeness. A goofy elbow bump, a messy group hug, a tap on the arm during a joke, all become reminders that we're wired to translate contact as care. But here's a softer twist. Touch doesn't always require another person. Weighted blankets calm anxious sleepers. Therapists sometimes suggest self-soothing gestures, like placing your hand over your heart or wrapping your arms around yourself. Even pets offer tactile medicine. The warmth of a cat curled on your lap, the nudge of a dog's nose against your hand. These signals reassure the nervous system that safety is near. Tonight, touch comes in subtler forms. The weight of your blanket pressing gently against you, the softness of sheets brushing your skin, even the rhythm of your own pulse felt in your fingertips. Each is a quiet reminder that contact soothes, even when it's only with yourself. You don't need anyone's hand right now. Your own body is enough to signal safety, enough to lull you deeper towards sleep. And in that small miracle, skin against fabric, breath against air, you're reminded that comfort can be as simple as touch, as steady as rest, as generous as your body's quiet ability to hold itself in peace. The Dunning-Kruger effect. When confidence masks incompetence. You've met them, or maybe been them. Someone who knows just enough about a topic to feel invincible, but not enough to realize how lost they actually are. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The psychological blind spot where limited knowledge breeds inflated confidence. The less you know, the more certain you sound. Mainstream psychology traces this to a famous 1999 study by David Dunning and Justin Kruger. Participants who performed poorly on reasoning and grammar tests not only scored low, they also wildly overestimated their performance. The irony? Those who scored highest tended to underestimate their success. Ignorance fuels confidence, while expertise breeds humility. The curve is cruel but poetic. The clueless feel certain, the wise feel unsure. A quirky tidbit. This bias isn't confined to classrooms or trivia nights. Surveys show that 80% of drivers believe they're above average. The math doesn't add up, but ego doesn't do math. It tells stories. Everyone thinks they're the exception, not the example. Even chess novices assume they just need practice to beat pros, while true experts hesitate, aware of the vast complexity beneath the surface. Scientists still argue whether the Dunning-Kruger effect is about ignorance or self-awareness itself. Is it that unskilled people lack the tools to recognize mistakes, or that social pressures push us to perform confidence until we believe it? Some psychologists suggest the illusion is protective. If we fully grasped our ignorance, we might never dare to begin. The fringe view goes further. Perhaps Dunning-Kruger isn't a flaw, but a developmental phase in learning. You need a dash of delusion to start something new. That early confidence, however misplaced, gives courage to face the unknown. It's only later, when experience humbles you, that genuine skill forms. Without that initial arrogance, you might never have picked up the guitar, written that messy first story, or applied for the job that changed everything. Some compare learning to climbing a mountain in fog. At first, the hill looks small. You start climbing easily. Then the fog lifts, and you realize you're on the first ridge of a vast peak. That moment, the valley of despair, is where most people give up. But those who keep going discover that mastery doesn't erase doubt. It teaches you how to live with it. And here's the cultural twist. Social media makes the Dunning-Kruger curve a daily spectacle. People declare expertise after one podcast or 5-minute video. I did my research, they say, brandishing confidence like armor. The internet flattens authority, letting conviction shout louder than knowledge. Yet among the noise, humility has become almost radical. A quiet act of honesty in a world that rewards certainty. Still, before we point fingers, it's worth remembering, none of us are immune. The moment you read about Dunning-Kruger and think, this explains everyone else, you've already fallen into its trap. Awareness doesn't eliminate the bias. It only hides it better. True wisdom keeps a quiet corner whispering, I could be wrong. And of course, the humor stings because it's true. Think of the time you tried to fix something. Your sink, your car, your Wi-Fi, armed with one tutorial and too much optimism. 10 minutes later, water's spraying and your router's blinking Morse code. You swear, I almost had it. That's Dunning-Kruger in its domestic glory. But here's the gentle side. Overconfidence is the training wheel of growth. It gets you moving before you realize how much balance you still need. Every expert once strutted through that same fog, declaring victory too soon. Mistaken certainty is just the first draft of understanding. So tonight, forgive yourself for the times you thought you knew more than you did. Knowledge is a ladder built from humility, and resting halfway up doesn't mean you've fallen. It means you're still climbing. Let curiosity take the reins again. Softer now, wiser now, free of the need to sound sure. Let that thought settle. The noise of certainty quiets, replaced by curiosity humming in the dark. The kind that says, maybe I don't know yet, and that's okay. Real understanding begins not with confidence, but with comfort in uncertainty. And as you drift toward sleep, rest in that space between knowing and not knowing, the place where learning and dreaming both begin. And if your mind wanders, let it. It's just your curiosity stretching its legs before the night fully closes its eyes. And so the journey through these 27 strange effects softens to a close. The edges of thought blur like watercolor, the bright highlights fading into muted calm. Each bias, each quirk of mind has drifted by like lanterns on a quiet river, glimpsed, then gone. You don't need to hold them tightly. You don't need to solve them tonight. All that remains is the gentle rhythm of breath, the steady weight of the pillow, and the quiet assurance that it's enough simply to rest. Let the mind dim its glow now. Drift lightly, slowly, into the safe cradle of sleep. Sweet dreams.